This is your guide to list building using 2 combat patrols in 30 minutes or less.
I'm Illuminator Xeris.
And I am Imatech, the Stormlord.
Imatech, how many games of Warhammer 40k and or Combat Patrol have you played at this point?
More than 5, but less than 10.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've played about once a weekend since spring of 2024.
And a whole bunch before that.
And quite a bit of older editions, yeah. Tail end of 2nd edition into 3rd edition. Some 4th edition, or a lot of 4th edition, I guess, actually, and some 5th edition.
So you are the Warhammer veteran, and I am the Warhammer newbie.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a veteran to 10th edition, but to the game as a whole, maybe. So today we are taking 2 Combat Patrol Necrons, and we're building an army with them.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting at 1,000 points, moving up to 1,500 points, and moving into 2,000 points. If we buy 2 Combat Patrol Necrons, what do we get?
We are going to get 2 Overlords armed with a Tachyon arrow. We are going to get 2 Canoptic Doomstalkers. We are going to get 6 Scorpeth Destroyers accompanied by 2 Plasmacytes. We are going to get 20 Necron Warriors, and we are going to get 6 Canoptic Scarab Swarms.
Okay. Do you think this is a good place to start?
I feel like you get quite a bit. So if you're looking to get into Necrons and you're looking to get a ton of models on the board, I feel like this is probably a good place to start.
I feel like it's okay. We talked about this in the Necron Combat Patrol review. This box doesn't really give you a very good discount, and so you get kind of a weird mix of models, and you don't get a very big discount. So I probably wouldn't actually start with 2 Combat Patrol Necrons if I were going to build a Necron list. But I do think what we're going to show here is at least a little compelling and might encourage somebody to build their army this way. To get up to 1,000 points, we don't need to add very much.
We do not.
What are we adding?
So you're going to go out and you're going to buy a box of Necron Warriors. It's going to come with a unit of Canoptic Scarab Swarms that you're going to set off to the side because it will not fit into this 1,000 points list. So you hold on to that one.
Yeah, we don't have enough points to put the Scarabs in at 1,000 points, but we are going to use them later. So you do want to make sure that you buy a box of Warriors that comes with the Scarab. That if you buy it like new retail, it's going to come with the Scarab. But if you bought it like used or something, maybe it wouldn't. So just want to make sure that you do have that extra Scarab Swarm because we are gonna add it back in later. And also, it's important the way that we're going to build all these Warriors out of the Combat Patrols and out of this box. We want to make sure that we have 10 with Gauss Flares, and we want to make sure we have 20 with Gauss Reapers. And so at 1,000 points, we're going to have to choose a detachment.
Yes.
So we're going to choose Awakened Dynasty. Part of the reason we're doing that is we have a kind of strange mix of models, and Awakened Dynasty lets us use all of the stratagems without restriction of like certain keywords. Like Canoptic Court is an option that would make our Canoptic Doomstalkers and our Scarabs really good, but it doesn't work with the Destroyers. There's not a single stratagem that you can use on the Destroyers. It doesn't work great with the Warriors because there's not a whole lot that you can target the Warriors with. So we're going to do Awakened Dynasty because it lets us have stratagems that can affect our whole army.
That makes sense.
So that's one of the things we're going to do at 1,000 points. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to have to pick our Warlord. Obviously, we don't have very many characters yet, so we're just going to make it one of the Overlords. And then what we're going to do with these 2 Overlords, we have 3 units of Warriors. What we're actually going to do is we're going to take the 2 Overlords we're going to put them with the 2 units that have Gauss Reapers, because the Gauss Reapers have a shorter range on their attack, and our Overlords have access to a strategy called Protocol of the Sudden Storm, which is going to give our warriors the assault keyword and let them reroll their advances. So they're going to be able to move up the board and take advantage of those shorter range guns a little more quickly. So that's how we want to make sure that we're pairing those Overlords with our units.
Fair.
And that's pretty much it to go over at 1,000 points.
Fantastic.
So 1,500 though.
Yeah, it looks like we are adding quite a bit to this list.
Yeah, we add a lot of models, and there's some changes to the structure. We're going to move some of the warriors around, and it's going to be big shake up to how we're running this at 1,000 points. So what are we doing to get to 1,500?
To get to 1,500 points with our 2 Necron Combat Patrols, we are going to add you, Illuminator Ceres. And then we are also adding a Chronomancer. We are also adding a Royal Warden. We are going to add 10 Immortals. And then the 2 10-man squads of the Necron Warriors that have the Gauss Reapers. You're going to combine that to be one single 20-man Necron Warriors, and that's going to bump the points up to 200 points from the 90 points each, which I find very interesting as a new player, because why would that more than double the value?
Yeah, so that's because Necrons, unlike a lot of other armies, they benefit from having bigger squads. Most armies can put special weapons in their squads, and so taking a bigger squad sometimes gives you access to more special weapons, sometimes it doesn't, and so that's going to affect the way that they're priced.
Okay.
With the Necron Warriors, they don't have access to special weapons, so adding more warriors essentially just adds more wounds to the squad, more models, more attacks. And then because the way Necron Reanimation Protocol works, which is their army-wide special rule, having more units in the army, having more models in the unit makes you better able to take advantage of those reanimation protocols. So that makes sense. Kind of why. And then we are adding one more thing.
We are, yep. I was going to get to that. We have the 3rd Canoptic Scarab Swarm, so go ahead and grab that little swarm that you got from getting that 3rd box of Necrons.
Yep. Toss in that. And so kind of a lot to go over about how we're changing the structure as well. We're going to take that Overlord that was with our warriors, and we're going to put him with the Immortals.
Okay.
And then with this big 20 brick of warriors, we're going to run the Royal Warden and the Chronomancer.
Okay.
So the reason for that is the Chronomancer is going to let us move up the board quite a bit faster, because it gives us access to an ability. It's commonly referred to as Fire and Fade, and what it means is you can move in your movement phase, and then you can move again after you have shot in your shooting phase. That's going to essentially take these warriors from having a 5-inch movement to a 10-inch movement. So
you're hiding behind terrain, a building or a rock. You poke your head out, you go pew, 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 and then you duck back behind whatever it was you were hiding behind, right? You can
use it that way, yeah. Yep, and in the first couple of turns of the game, we're probably just using it to get up the board quickly, but then in later turns, we were using it exactly like that. We're using it, and that's kind of why it's called Fire and Fade. We're using it to pop out of cover, fire, and then fade back into that cover. And then what the Royal Warden is going to give us with that unit is the ability to fall back and shoot. Because we want that unit to be really aggressive and move up the board quickly, there's a high chance that it just gets charged by our enemy. And because they're 20 warriors, they might not kill all of them. So that gives us the ability to use reanimation protocols, get some warriors back, and then we can fall back, and then we can shoot, and then we can charge again if we want to. That's also an ability that the Royal Warden has, is you can fall back, shoot, and charge. We're also adding Illuminator Xeris.
Mm-hmm.
And Illuminator Xeris in Awakened Dynasty is pretty strong. He buffs all of our battle line. If he's standing close to them, he just gives them +1 armor penetration. And then he, on his own, it has the lone operative keyword. If he is close to any Necron unit, does not have to be a battle line unit. Any friendly Necron unit, if he's within 3 inches of it, he gains the lone operative ability. Lone operative is pretty good. It means he can only be targeted by ranged attacks if you're within 12 inches of it. So your opponent has to get really close to be able to shoot him. He also has a 2+ armor save, a 4+ invulnerable save, and a 4+ feel no pain. And he's toughness 8, and he has 9 wounds. So our opponent is going to have to get really close and dump a lot of firepower into Illuminator Xeris to take him down. And then, because we're playing Awakened Dynasty, we have access to a stratagem called Protocol of the Eternal Revenant. And that lets us bring him back just one time in the whole game. We can only use it once. But it lets us bring him back with half of his wounds. So our opponent then has to dump even more firepower into him to be able to remove him. So Illuminator Xeris in this list is
bonkers.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Part of the reason to choose Awakened Dynasty. And then the Immortals, they're just adding a battle line unit, which pairs a little bit well with Xeris. Also pairs well with just, we have a high number of characters because we're playing Awakened Dynasty. And you want a lot of characters in your units, because if you have a character in your unit, the Awakened Dynasty rule is just you get +1 to hit.
And I just wanted to make a clarifying question here. So the Warlord, there was a Warlord with each of the Reaper units. We combined the Reaper units, so we're moving one of those Warlords to the Immortals. Are we keeping the Overlord, the other Overlord, with the unit?
With the Reapers, no. We're going to move him to the Gauss Flayers.
Gotcha.
Because the Reaper unit is going to be led by the Royal Warden and then joined by the Chronomancer.
Gotcha. So the Overlord, one is going to go to the Immortals, and the other Overlord is going to go to the
10-man squad of Necron warriors that has the Gauss Flayers.
Gotcha.
Yep. And that's what we're changing and what we're adding, and kind of why we're doing that at 1500. And then what are we adding at 2000?
We are adding 2 more Chronomancers. We are adding a Technomancer, and we are adding 5 Death Marks. Now, the Technomancer and the 5 Death Marks, they come in the kill team, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. So, yeah. It's the Herotech Circle kill team box. You get 5 Death Marks and Technomancer.
So we're adding those, and then we are also adding 6 Canoptic Wraiths.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so what we're doing with the Chronomancers is we're attaching those to the Immortals and the 10-man squad of warriors. And so that means all of our battle line units have a Chronomancer attached to them. So that means now they can all do the Fire and Fade trick.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, with our Immortals, now that they have that Overlord with them, which they had in 1,500 points. But one trick with that is your Overlord gives you once per battle round a free stratagem. So you could choose Protocol of the Conquering Tyrant, which lets you reroll hits. And then the Immortals have just a native ability, like on their data sheet, is just the Immortals ability. Lets them reroll wounds if you're targeting something that's on an objective. So you get full reroll hits, full reroll wounds, which is pretty good. Combine that with a Fire and Fade for the extra mobility or the extra speed, and that turns those Immortals into a pretty strong unit. And then with our Technomancer, we are going to run the Technomancer with the Wraiths. The Wraiths are already also very tough on their own. They have a 3+ armor save. They have a 4+ invulnerable save. And so when we add the Technomancer into that squad, it gives them a 5+ Feel No Pain.
Oh, wow.
And the Technomancer's ability lets us heal a D3 wounds on one of our models, and we get to do that after we use reanimation protocols. So we use reanimation protocols in our command phase, and then we use the Technomancer's ability at the end of our movement phase. So we get to restore even more wounds to these wraiths that are already, 3+ armor, 4+ invulnerable, and 5+ Feel No Pain. So that makes them great at holding an objective. And that's kind of how the whole list is built. It's built with the idea of taking and holding objectives through some of these tougher units, and some of the speed that we gain from the Chronomancers. And then what the Death Marks add is they add the Deep Strike ability, so we can deploy them essentially anywhere on the table. There are some guidelines about how you have to deploy them, but we can deploy them essentially anywhere on the table where we need them. So that helps us complete like secondary missions. And then they also have kind of an interesting ability where if they are on the table and your opponent tries to deep strike in, you get to just shoot at them for free when they deep strike.
Oh, nice.
So it can also kind of buoy your defenses somewhere. And that is one thing I like about this list is we can go kind of full on aggressive, move up the board really fast with these Chronomancers, rely on these tough units to hold objectives. But we can also kind of move into a really like castled up and defensive gameplay plan by using these Chronomancers to have our units kind of constantly in cover or constantly out of line of sight. And then we just have all these units that have, invulnerable saves and Feel No Pains and ways to reanimate. So it lets us play both a fairly aggressive and fairly defensive game plan. Nice. One of the other things that we get is once we start adding in our Chronomancers, we have the Cryptek keyword, and that makes all of our Scarabs go from objective control 0 to objective control 1. Oh, so nice. It actually lets our Scarabs start taking and holding objectives as well.
Sweet deal.
So we have some kind of throwaway units that we can use to capture objectives. So really, I think this army's got quite a bit of play, considering how odd some of the unit choices turned out to be. I know you don't have a ton of experience with Necrons, but what do you think of this list overall?
Overall, I feel like it's going to be a really interesting list. If for no other reason than because all of these units do something a little bit different. Mm-hmm. So you get to play around with different play styles, I feel like.
Yeah, you do. You have a lot of units that play differently. You've got long range units, you've got short range units. You've got, really, we didn't even talk about some of this stuff in the Combat Patrol. Like the Canoptic Doomstalker is a fairly good anti-tank unit that also can serve an anti-infantry role, because its gun has the blast keyword. So if it shoots into big units, it gets extra attacks.
And it works really well on Squig Hog Boys, as I discovered.
It does. It really does. That 3 damage and Squig Hog Boys having 3 wounds, it basically just means you have to make a feel no pain or you die. So
correct. Yes, that is something that I learned the hard way, my poor little Squig Hog Boys.
Yeah. It's also nice because you can target them. Part of why we chose Awakened Dynasty is because we can use a lot of these stratagems in interesting ways, and one of those interesting ways is you can actually use Protocol of the Sudden Swarm to give your Doomstalkers the assault keyword. So they can move up the board and still fire they can advance up the board and still fire the big Doomsday Blaster. So, we have some play there. The Scorpec Destroyers, they seem a little strange in this army. They don't really synergize with a lot of what we're doing, but they are a fast-moving melee unit, and one of the things that we're doing with this list is we're taking a really aggressive posture in the first couple turns of the game, and they really fill that role. They can, move up, hit your opponent, because they have I always want to call them Plasma Mites, but that's not actually the name of them. It's Plasma Sight, I think.
Yes, the Plasma Sight.
Yeah, the Plasma Sights. Once per game, you can get devastating wounds on these Scorpec Destroyers. So you can advance them in, put some dev wounds on really tough, really hard to kill units from your opponent, and then you can kind of finish them off with the lethal hits from all these warriors and immortals and all these Gauss weapons that have the lethal hits keyword. So even just using the combat patrol units, you've got some options unlocked. We also didn't even talk about the Tachyon arrows on the Overlords.
Yeah, because I was on the Games Workshop website to see, there are 2 Overlords. There's one with the Tachyon arrow, and there's one with the, what was it?
It's called the Translocation Shroud.
Yeah, that. It looked really rad.
Yeah, that model is very cool. I think that model is actually quite a bit cooler than the Tachyon Arrow one.
I would be hard pressed to agree, because that guy looked real rad.
Yeah, he's a cool model. I think the Tachyon Arrow is good. It's one shot. You can only shoot it one time for the whole game. But it is a Strength 16 AP -5 D6 +2 damage weapon. So
that sounds like a lot.
Yeah, if your opponent has something really tough on their end of the table that you just otherwise kind of feel like we're going to struggle into, right? Because we really only have 2 anti-tank pieces in the Canoptic Doomstalkers. So these let you, at least one time, you can kind of fire off both these Tachyon arrows and maybe take down whatever your opponent's biggest, scariest threat, toughest threat, I should say, is. So even just with the units out of the combat patrol, I think you have some options, and you have some really different play styles, like you pointed out. And then another thing I think you gain by playing a list like this is it is layering a little complexity on top of the combat patrols. And I feel like this is a list where you have a lot of room to grow as a player. You have a lot of different things that you can try. You can try playing aggressive. You can try playing defensively. And the timing on these stratagems, learning how and when to use them, is really going to help you learn the game overall. So I feel like this list, when we compare it to the Orcs list that we did previously, the Orcs list was really straightforward. It had a lot of redundancy in the units. I feel like this list is a lot less straightforward, but you have a lot more room to grow as a player by playing this list.
I would say difficulty level, the Orcs is like level 1 or like an easy level, and I would say that this Necrons list is probably more at like a medium level.
Yeah, I think for a new player, like I mean, because you've run into this even in Combat Patrol, right? Sometimes you feel like there's just so many data sheets, and there's so
Yes.
much on each data sheet that it can be, you can get lost in the weeds a little as a new player, and you kind of feel like you're constantly stopping the game and saying, hold on, let me look up what my guy does. Maybe there's something I can do here. Or you don't want to stop the game because everybody's having a good time, and so you just gloss over stuff that probably would have actually helped you in the moment.
100%. That app that we've downloaded on my phone helps so much. To be able to, like, instead of looking at the book and switching between like 20 different pages, it's all right there.
Yeah, I think the app helps. And then kind of one last thought that I had about this list. I don't know that you would have this thought because I don't think that you've played quite enough games yet to kind of understand this. But one thing about this list is we're not taking some of the really like marquee Necron units. We're not taking the Silent King. We're not taking Doomsday Arcs. And we're not taking any Catan. And so we're not kind of leaning into that tournament scene, which makes this feel like a really casual and friendly list to bring to like a beer hammer night with your buddies, right? You're not just overwhelming them with models that they just are like, well, I don't own a model that can even hurt that.
Right.
And so that
throw my cat on the table, my cat will knock it over.
yeah. I mean, you're almost reliant on stuff like that. I feel like if you're new to the game and you don't have a big volume of models to choose from, and so that is the other kind of last advantage that I would say this list has is if you show up with this, nobody's going to choose you being like a tournament metagame chasing player.
Correct.
But you do still have some powerful tools to still hopefully, stay in a game and if you're playing in a Warhammer league or something, I think that this list would do fine. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. My final thought on it. I agree with you. Medium difficulty. Probably a good list to start on. So thanks for listening, and be sure to check out our other Combat Patrol reviews and our other list building videos.
Thanks for tuning in.